I think you're going to encounter some degree of it.
Yeah.
For years until they figure it out. But that's really good to hear, though, that they're working to collaborate that process for you, for anybody advanced. Because, yeah, it's not like you're going to all of a sudden understand how to use all your medications, how to make all these appointments. And it takes, I don't think I realized what I had learned until, like, I had to teach it to somebody.
Yeah.
So are you, did your parents teach you, or are you just kind of like absorbing it as far as management? Or are you still kind of in that, like, in between? I'm just trying to get a
yeah. My parents were very they kind of managed it sort of when I was growing up, so I didn't actually have to think about it. And then when I left school and I went to college and I started studying and working, and all of a sudden I got hit by this ton of bricks where I was like, oh my gosh, like, how am I managing my stress levels? How am I managing my diet? How am I managing my time? Because my body went into shock from that transition between high school and college. And I was having 20 seizures a day at work. Trying to teach children, and your brain I have petit mal seizures, so it's not like grand mal seizures. I could still function, but not clearly. And I kind of sat down the one day and I said, okay, I need to start managing everything. So I keep journals. I have about 5 journals where I manage. Yeah. So I manage. Okay.
Yeah, tell me your process.
I have one journal for doctor's appointments and questions for doctors that I write in, and I basically interview my doctors on certain topics, and then I'll go into detail with that now. I have a diet journal where I monitor everything that I eat, and as soon as something makes me feel like a seizure's gonna come on, or like it's gonna trigger a seizure or anything like that, I cut it out of my diet straight away.
So you have foods that that you're that sensitive to, that you can tell?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Dairy is one of them, strangely enough, and citrus.
Interesting.
And then obviously things like coffee. I was a pre-primary school teacher for about 3 years, and we don't drink a lot of water. Because one teacher will walk into the room and say, hey, do you want tea or coffee? And you're like, oh, coffee, please.
Yes.
And that happens about 15 times a day. And before you know it, you've had 16 cups of coffee. And you go home wondering why you're having so many seizures, stimulants, and you're having 3 sugars in your coffee each time, So I had to cut coffee out completely. I can't take that risk. It's too risky for me, unfortunately.
Was that tough?
That was the most difficult. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can't
imagine.
It's
habit, you wake up, you have coffee, you go to work, you have coffee. So it was to cut that habit.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's really the way you're describing, how you're like selected with your diet. I'm thinking, I know my daughter, who's 20, does not avoids dairy, and she has a lot of, she's having partial seizures or whatever. And I don't know, it's funny, I've kind of pushed her to write down what she eats, and she's kind of naturally eliminating things kind of in the same way. But I think it's so important to hear that and hear what you do. I think that's really helpful for parents to know, how you're managing it. So you have all these journals. So you have the food journal, you have the doctor's question journal.
Yeah, and then the third and most important one is my seizure journal. So I have divided the pages up into a table format where I have triggers, time, what I was working on, and I can't remember the other columns, but there's about 7 columns, and the most important one. And I rate them. So I rate them from 0 to 10 on how bad they were, just for my own peace of mind, because people don't believe you.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. Especially if you're having partial seizures or petit mal seizures and they can't tell. they kind of just assume that you're looking for attention or whatever. Luckily, my husband can tell the difference in my behavior. So when I have a seizure and when I don't have a seizure, which is helpful because then he'll stop whatever he's doing, just keep his eye on me, make sure I don't do anything silly, and then, carry on with what he was doing.
So you just have to live with it. You live with it.
Oh, yeah, you live with it and you learn to cope with it and things like that. It's difficult. Living in denial doesn't solve anything. You kind of just have to learn how to cope with it and what your triggers are. If your trigger is, I don't know, intensive exercise, for an example, then you have to learn to adjust your exercise regime and do slower, less cardiac involved exercises, or at least that's my case.
Okay. So you figured that out too, the hard way.
Yeah. So with the climbing, it's not so cardio intensive. It's more strength orientated and things like that. Whereas
you enjoy that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. My brothers and his family are all like so into climbing. They love it, and they got my mother who's 80 to do it.
Oh,
and
well,
she
congratulations.
Loves it too. Yeah. I'm really I'm always like, no, if they're all into something, I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. But it's just, it's not convenient here. But I'm really glad to hear about that. I might, and I think my daughter tried it when she was visiting them.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Kind of in between, so you're not all, stressing the heart as much, but you're using, a lot of different muscles, and
yes.
So you're getting a lot of other benefits. And
yes, absolutely. So it's things like that where I had to say to myself, okay, you can't run. I cannot do the running thing. Like, I know it works and I know everyone's very happy, but that it stimulates me a little bit too much. So
everybody has to do the same thing,
when I stop, then my brain kind of freaks out and it goes, what are you doing? You need to stop this. And I go into this little mini seizure because I've overdone it or I've pushed myself too far.
Wow.
So I have to do things like push-ups or sit-ups or, other exercises.
Well, you got to find out what works for you. And I think that it's, important that you didn't just give up. You tried something else, because it's just not fun to.
There's always an alternative.
Yeah, there is.
So that's helpful. I don't really agree with the whole, if it doesn't work for me, I must eliminate it completely type of mindset. If it doesn't work for you, then you find an alternative. You try the alternative. So going back to the coffee thing, instead of drinking coffee, then I'll drink green tea with lemon, or Earl Grey tea with cream, or whatever. Okay, not, but an alternative. So I still get that drink in winter, and I still get to feel warm and fuzzy, and that's fine. But it's just not, something else.
So you have to make those sacrifices that a lot of people at your age and a lot of people in general don't necessarily have to,
Yeah, that's true.
It takes some maturity too, because, not everybody is able to make that kind of a choice, and, and for their, to keep themselves stable. Now, I've seen, two of my kids be able to get to the point where they can make that choice, and they're able to say, oh yeah, I don't want to do that again, because I remember I had a seizure. But then my older daughter, this will have to get cut out, but she can't. She is she cannot, and she just doesn't have the impulse control. She just can't keep herself from drinking coffee. And now it's alcohol, so it's terrifying.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's really tough. But so I really have watched my own kids kind of make choices that I wasn't mature enough to make at their age. So I'm like, that's great. I mean, good for you. It's I don't know whether you even want to hear that, but
no, thank you. I appreciate that, because sometimes I was trying to explain to my high school class the other day that when you become an adult, peer pressure doesn't just disappear. So, like you say, I have friends who enjoy drinking, and that's fine. They can enjoy drinking. They find it exceptionally strange that I don't drink, though. And then, they get to a point where they're like, oh, Alex, just one shot, or Alex, just one sip. And you kind of like, no, I don't, I'd rather not take that risk.
Right.
I prefer being sound mind in all areas, not just like seizure wise, but also sober.
I can't quite say I'm quite like that, but I respect that completely. I think that
well, it's just another sacrifice that I've had to make, another chance that I'm not willing to take.
Right.
Unfortunately. But I do drink a lot of milkshakes when I go out with them, so that's also probably not a good thing. But that's my alternative, is then to, if you're going to have a Don Pedro, I'm going to have a milkshake, and then we're even,
Absolutely. Everybody's got to have their pressure relief valve, and, whatever, I don't want to say self-destructive because it's not really, I just like comfort or whatever.
Yeah.
It's dopamine rush, whatever gives it to us. I think that trying to not, have a way to do that would be tough. No fun. So.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So.
But yeah, the journals are really my coping mechanism. They're a lot. And
when did you start that? I mean, did you just think of that, or did somebody, maybe you said it, but did somebody suggest it?
Oh, no. No, it started with me wanting to interview my doctor. And so I wrote out an interview inside the journal that I take to doctor's appointments, and asked her a whole bunch of questions. Like at one point I was worried that I was schizophrenic, and then she had to explain that you're either schizophrenic or you're not. And because when I have seizures, my imagination goes wild, and I was worried that I become schizophrenic when I have a seizure. And I know it sounds silly, but when you're
it really doesn't. It doesn't at all. No.
So it started with the one journal, and then when I started working and I was having 20 seizures a day, that started another journal. I was like, okay, I need to keep track of this, because every time I have a seizure, I'm putting myself and the children I'm teaching in a certain amount of danger. Especially if you're teaching babies. The one day I was looking after the toddler class, and I had this child in my arms, and my biggest concern was that I was going to have a seizure and I was going to drop them. So, I then had to go to my senior and say, listen, I'm struggling with seizures at the moment. I need you to just keep an eye on me. Maybe putting me in charge of the toddler class this week is not a good idea. Do you mind if I substitute with another teacher? And just make them aware that, things are not
that hard.
That was difficult, yeah.
Yeah, because then I would think like they might not think I'm as reliable, or it might make them nervous.
Yeah, the biggest concern was that I would start to panic, and that was the last thing I wanted, because I did have everything under control and I was monitoring everything. That was one of the most difficult things for me was, are you going to change your perspective of me? Are you going to think I'm less professional or less of a teacher, or that I'm not coping with my work? Or, it was really about, what are you going to think of me? And there were consequences to that, unfortunately, where my internship was cut short shortly after that. But it's okay, because it was just an internship, and I did get a job after that. And then I was very straightforward, like in the job interview. I was okay.
Yeah. Let's start from the beginning. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just one of those situations where it was a learning curve, and you adapt and you let people know from the get-go that this is the situation. I am capable of working, just, if I faint, do something.
Right. It doesn't have to mean that I'm not, this is just some thing I have, like you have whatever. You go to the bathroom for 10 hours or whatever, kind of detoxifying it. Because, I know my son had a really he's a big guy. He had a seizure at school, at the high school where he goes to school. And since then, he doesn't have a lot of seizures. They are hyper vigilant. which makes it, I'm like, he's not going to I don't have to be, I can't be on call 24/7 because, it's just not possible. And most likely, we try to, as like eliminate as many variables of risk as possible. But I have noticed that they're much more overprotective of him, and it's kind of a catch-22 then, because he's has some cognitive challenges. So here he's trying to be able to do these things that I know he can do by himself, but he's got to have somebody with him because of the seizure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can't imagine, in a work setting, I can see why it would be tough to experience that. But it sounds like you turned it into, okay, I'm going to put this out there first, and I'll be able to know right away if.
Yeah, I feel like it's better that way. It's better to be, rejected up front. Sorry, we don't want to deal with this right now. You're not going to get the job.
Mm-hmm.
Then to work for them for 3 months and then get told, oh, sorry, we can't put up with this. So yeah, I prefer the upfront, straightforward method.
Yeah, right. And then you're not living in, fear of when are they going to find out, and But that's interesting to hear your perspective on that. That's got to be tough. So what's your degree in, and how was your education overall? Did you feel, did you get like any accommodations, or was there, what's the education?
From pre-primary school, I was in a Montessori school.
Okay.
And that worked surprisingly well, especially for my cognitive learning.
Uh-huh.
I managed to read and write, and from quite an early age. Not that I'm trying to toot my own horn, but it was the Montessori method uses a lot of repetition. So due to that repetition, it bypassed any learning difficulties that the TSC would have caused me later down the line.
Interesting.
Which was incredible. But unfortunately, later I suffered from severe bullying. I think like at 5, where I came home black and blue. My mom was like, "What's happening at school?" And then I had to tell her that there was a person who would beat me because I ate weird food and I had a red face and I was fat, and she thought I was ugly and she didn't understand. And we were kids, so I don't hold it against her now if she
No, I know,
but it was just difficult for my parents at the time, because their first question is, where were the teachers? And then you have to say, well, you go and you tell a teacher and they tell you to stop tattletaling. And because you're 5, you do as you're told. So it was one of those situations. And my father had to explain to me that, there's a difference between tattletaling because somebody colored in on your page and telling a teacher that something is wrong because you're being hit,
Yeah.
So he had to explain that to me. And then later, my mom looked for schools, but unfortunately she didn't find one she was happy with or one that would accommodate me. So she homeschooled me and my brothers.
Wow.
And that was incredible. My schooling experience from that point forward has been amazing. I mean, it doesn't protect you from bullying, and there are people that bully you, even if they are homeschoolers and they have their own issues. But I had lots of friends, and I learned conflict resolution, and we went on field trips, and we read a lot. I mean, my family and I read a lot. So that was where my learning came from, was you got a novel and then you study the history and the geography in the novel, and then you do maths and writing and reading. It was fantastic. So I homeschooled till matric, and then I went to Montessori college.
So do you have to pass like a standardized test in order, I assume, to move to the next level?
Yes. So in South Africa, our Department of Education sorry, I'm trying to think of how to explain this. You go through a department. All homeschoolers go through a department where they say to you, okay, you're allowed to study at home, but you have to write these standardized exams at these locations. And if you don't pass, you don't matriculate. But if you pass, then you get a national matric certificate, and it is valid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it was interesting. At one point, we were worried about the whole matric thing. And
Did
then,
your mom figure that out?
yeah, she did. The government started accommodating homeschoolers because of the Petulazzi Trust. They're a law firm who started giving homeschoolers the right to write a matriculation examination. And so thanks to them, a lot of us managed to matriculate on time, or on the, according to the standards and all of that.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
So great. So then you got that, and then you were able to go on to the next.
To college, yeah. So I went to Montessori College, and I got a Montessori diploma and started working.
So you're teaching then in the Montessori system?
I was, yeah. Unfortunately, I had to resign a few years ago because my epilepsy just wasn't stabilizing. So, sorry.
No, that's okay. Frustrating.
So I said to my boss, thank you, but I need to just stabilize my condition, and then I'll get back to you. And so I started working at a high school instead, and because you can communicate with the children and they can communicate with you, it was less stressful. So when you're teaching toddlers and they're crying, they can't tell you what they want because they haven't developed their language skills yet.
Yeah.
But if you're in high school and they're having an argument, you can sit them down and say, okay, what is the issue and how can I help?
Okay.
So that helped a lot. So at the moment, I'm teaching high school. But I'm studying a second degree in English and geography.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So, yeah.
So you enjoy learning, and do you like teaching?
Oh, yes, I do.
You do.
No, I love it. Yeah. It's awesome.
That's great. I'd like to hear, like people that have found their passion, or at least, somewhat of their passion in an employment situation too. Yeah. So, wow, that's really great. You've had some challenges with the seizures interfering with your work in some ways. You've really persevered and found a lot of kind of like going this way, but you went that way. That's great.
Yeah, you have to do that a lot, unfortunately. I find
that's part of the sitch with TSC. But just to keep I know it beats you down. I think I see it kind of beats you down, especially when you get older, and it's harder to, I think depending on your level of cognitive effect or whatever, to navigate this stuff yourself. So I think that you're doing a really good job.
Shame, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm impressed, and not that I think that TSC is just so variable that you can be, it's just like any human being. It's just this, I don't know what your reflections are on it, but like everything is more intense in some ways.
Yeah, it is. It feels like you're constantly living on the edge, or on a roller coaster. When I was in matric, I used to tell my mom that I feel like I'm on a train that's just going way too fast, and there's nothing that I can do to slow it down. Because you're constantly worried about. Take something simple, for example. With my medication, I have to take it at 7 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock at night. if I take it at 7 o'clock in the morning and 10 o'clock at night, my epilepsy is out of balance because those doses only last 12 hours. And as soon as you go 3 hours over your 12-hour time frame, it affects your cognitive levels, it affects your sleep patterns, it affects your fatigue. It affects so much. So I have alarms that tell me, okay, you need to take your medication now.
So that's how you time manage that.
Yeah, because life gets busy. You know, you're working, you're studying, you're socializing, you're married, and time gets away from you. And before you know it, before you know it, it's 11 o'clock, and you go, oh my gosh, I forgot to take my medication. You know, let me take it now quickly, and then you've just jumbled up your whole body system.
Yeah.
So that's simple, very simple example. Another example would be, this might be a little bit intimate for some listeners, but women have a monthly cycle, and that boosts a certain hormone in your body that messes with everything else. So you're emotional, and you're tired, and and so you have to learn to cope with, okay, just because you're emotional doesn't mean you're allowed to take it out on people, or because my body is out of balance, am I even going to wake up tomorrow morning? Like, I could have a seizure in my sleep and not wake up tomorrow. Then what is my husband going to do? How is my husband going to feel? And you start thinking of all these what ifs, and then you're all of a sudden overwhelmed with all these possible what ifs. It's just it's this constant battle of balance. And I'm not saying that normal people don't have to balance their lives. We all have to balance our lives. It's just when you're not in control of your own mind because you're having so many seizures, it tends to get quite frightening, and you feel like you're living on the edge all the time.
Wow. Yeah. It totally makes sense. I mean, I've seen that, and I think, outside looking in, sometimes it can be easy, not easy, but to get frustrated when things aren't, the level of repetition, and there's aspects of teaching my own kids that I've gotten frustrated, but also being able to kind of go back and say, I don't know what this is like, hearing you say it, I think it's helpful for parents to know that, because it is important to slow down, and to not slow down, but it's just a lot. It's a lot to manage. And on every level, and that typical people. I mean, like you said, I really believe everybody has a story. Everybody struggles in some way, and we're all just kind of missing each other if there's conflict. But TSC is like, I just feel really strongly like it's an exceptional challenge in a lot of ways. It makes you really face your humanity and live with that unknown of, like, are you going to wake up? I mean, I think that I've thought that about my kids at certain times, are they going to wake up and to hear you say it, it's like, yeah, that's, oh man, I don't know.
It is a reality.
You do think that. So, I guess that kind of leads me to, how have you kind of, I guess as you've said, you manage your time, and you use alarms and journals, and it sounds like you're really bright, and obviously, and you've figured a lot out, but oh gosh, I think I just dropped the thought. But how what was my thought? I don't know. How do you deal? Is it the writing? How do you, like, I mean, I think
that is one of my coping mechanisms, and it has been since I was little. Because as soon as you get anxious, it's room for a seizure. So my coping mechanisms since I was a kid, I've always kept a personal diary, and even if I'm writing the biggest load of nonsense, it helps to calm me down.
Uh-huh.
So when I was 9, I'm pretty sure I wrote a list of all my favorite actors, and that just, for some reason, managed to calm me down. And my father thought it was hilarious because I had David Hasselhoff on there, and he was like, you know, he's old, right? And I'm like 9, going, well, he's Knight Rider, so he's on my list, you know? It was just one of those, like, childish situations where your dad like David.
Yeah.
But anyway, as I got older, I started building puzzles because I know they freak some people out. My husband is one of them. But it's the process of organizing the pieces and observing the pieces and going, okay, where does it fit? And it's a therapeutic but analytical activity where you have to go, okay, you build the frame first. That's step 1. And then step 2 is, for me, is to sort the pieces out by color. So I have these little green balls that I would sort the pieces into. And then you look at the picture and you say, okay, where is the pink? It's in the top right corner. Okay, so you take the pink ball and you start building just the pink. You ignore all the other colors and you just focus on the pink. And then you go, okay, the sunset is finished, so let me focus now on maybe the palm tree, because that's a smaller but connected piece. So you take all the greens and the browns that you have organized and you work systematically through them. And for a long time, especially through my worst time, building and rebuilding puzzles was my coping mechanism.
Really?
I went through 2 years, unfortunately, where I had hit puberty and my epilepsy completely freaked out. What happened was I trapped myself in my own little bubble, and I wouldn't let my mom or my dad or my brothers or anybody else in. I refused to communicate with anybody. And I locked myself in my room, and that's all I did all day, was just build puzzles. And I got to the point where I could build the same puzzle the right way, upside down, inside out, and sideways. And for me, that was just, because, you look at the shape. So once you've built it the right way up enough times, you challenge yourself. And I was feeling so anxious that I just needed something to calm me down. And I only had about 5 puzzles at the time. So I would just build and rebuild and build and rebuild them. And like you mentioned earlier, the repetition drove my mom insane because she wasn't understanding what I was doing and I wouldn't communicate with her. Yeah, and she was very, very worried. But
I can see why that would be helpful, because you can completely focus on that. It makes sense. And, you can keep the outside thoughts maybe out.
Yeah, you can keep them at bay and you can just focus on those puzzle pieces. And it's amazing. Even now, this past school holiday, just for fun, I bought a puzzle and I was like, I haven't done this in a few years. And, and I sat down and I started working through it and I was like, oh my goodness, I remember this feeling. You know, this feeling of serenity and peace. And even though my husband was next to me and he was watching TV, I could still go, wow, like I'm at peace, and it was fun. And even he thought it was amazing to see that, with work and other things, you're always so rushed and you're always busy. You don't very often get that feeling unless you go on vacation.
So it's almost like a meditation in some ways. You're doing something, but that's so you have that. It's a solid coping mechanism.
And then
not self-destructive in it. And working your brain. So that's duly noted. So,
And I do believe that obviously, as we said earlier, everybody else will have their different coping mechanisms. But for me, if it doesn't help me release my thoughts or process my thoughts in some way, it's useless. So with the writing, the blog, for example, if something happens, like I don't know if you read the recent one with my leg.
yes, I thought, oh man, I'd be so. I'm a runner, and I had a shin fracture like a few years ago, and I couldn't run for like 6 months, and it was awful. But I just had to do something else.
Exactly. So that hindrance is frustrating me because I can barely walk properly. I feel
It's
like
a grief,
like waddle from side to side. So
oh, I'm so sorry.
writing that, it's okay. Writing that and going, oh, the irony. It just helped me to process what had happened.
A lot of writing. Yeah.
And like this is not a permanent hindrance, thank goodness, but this is something you can learn from. And I just had to expel that emotion because otherwise it just kind of builds up. I get exceptionally frustrated.
Oh, I hear you.
Yeah.
I don't have a TSC, but I do get that. Yeah. You've got to process it. You've got to. So that's, yeah. So relationships, you're married, and that's, okay. So I just want to make sure I'm getting all the pieces here of the puzzle. Not that it's a puzzle, it's a beautiful panorama, seriously. So you went through college, you're working, and you're blogging, and so, like, I guess I'm going to go back. And so high school, where you were homeschooled, so how were, like, interactions with other people, your social life? Kind of bring me along with that.
Oh, absolutely. With homeschooling in South Africa, especially such a early stage in homeschooling where it was kind of sort of illegal and we weren't actually supposed to be doing it, a lot of moms go into this. It's super funny, sorry, but I'll explain why now. They go into this mode where they're like, I have to homeschool my child, but what about socializing? And they freak out. And what they do is they then like form these massive social groups.
Oh, really?
Like ice skating, yeah. Like or going to the park for a picnic or something, and you meet 50 to 100 kids all at once. Boom.
Really?
Like, yeah, because everyone's worried about socializing. So they just throw you in this park with hundreds of strange kids, like, socialize, do your thing. You need to learn these skills.
Right. You got to check this off.
Yeah. So we were constantly meeting new people all the time. And that helps with meeting people with autism, meeting people with ADHD, and how does your mom teach you? Or what curriculum do you use? And what books do you like to read? So meeting twins, meeting triplets, meeting a family that's only boys or a family that's only girls, and you kind of stand back going, wow, that's weird, like as a kid, just because you're like, I am the older sister with 2 brothers, so at least there's some balance in gender. Imagine living in a house with just girls. Like, that must be chaotic, and you start talking to different people and making new friends. And we only got cell phones from a much older age. So you write letters to these people, and then you develop writing skills. And, and it's funny because every homeschooling mom is worried about socializing, but the irony is that you meet people all the time because of it. And so, if you didn't want to join that group, you could always join that group, and it was fun. But at the same time, living with TSC, it's a very obvious difference. So, every person I met, everybody, I'm not over-exaggerating, I'm telling you the truth. Why do you have a red face?
Really?
Why is your face lumpy? Yep, everybody. Because it was so obvious. And then they would go up to my brothers and be like, yo, dude, your sister's so weird, and she's got like this red face. Is she sunburned? And then my brothers couldn't answer those questions, so I would have to come over and be like, no, I'm not sunburned. I was born with it. Um, so that was my go-to response. And it actually still is, if I'm very honest, is that it's kind of just ingrained. It's an automatic response where somebody goes, oh gosh, what happened to your face? I was born with it. And then they go, oh, so it's not the sun or it's not acne. No.
And it shuts it right down.
Yeah, it shuts it right down,
Yep.
and
puts it back on them.
Yeah, yeah. So that was interesting. And to watch my brothers grow up with that, makes you feel a bit guilty as the person with TSC.
Yeah,
but
how many layers of guilt are there? A lot.